Welcome back, everyone. Mike McConville here one more time, Stratford, Ontario, Canada. We got this early 70s Les Paul Custom that we're doing a complete refret on. So first I'll bring you in and explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. Let's have a look at the original fret versus the new frets that are going in. So this is the cross-sectional profile of the new frets we're putting in, and this is the cross-sectional profile of the original fret. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the name fretless wonder. Now, I refer to this as the fretless blunder. I don't know what possessed Gibson to use these tiny little frets that were small enough to begin with and then grind them down. I guess, I don't know, they were thinking like, oh, it would be like a fretless guitar. Well, yeah, it sort of was like a fretless guitar. And the reason the customer showed up is he's owned it since it was like 2 years old. Every note on the guitar splats out and nothing really tunes because the top of the crown has been flattened, so the string does not fret in the center of the crown. These are the new 151 frets. The difference will be night and day. So I want to walk you through the procedure that I go through for each and every fret before I tap them in. So I leave that overhang long enough that I can grab it with the end nippers and then flex that overhang down before clipping it off so that it fits tight against the binding. Now, flex is the operative term here. You don't want to kink it or bend it. Just flex it down slightly. And now over to the stationary disc center. This is run on a foot switch. I give that switch a tap. And I'm doing the bevel as well. Other side. Next step, I buff that end. Other side. Now this is one of the many hand tools that I got from my Danish father-in-law who passed away a couple of years ago, and he willed all of his hand tools to me. And I am finding as every day passes, you will see the millwright's tools showing up time and time again. So I use this now to tap my frets in. So it's not just the crown, the width and height of the crown, but the actual tang itself. This tang is 35 thou. This tang, the original fret, is 26 thou, and that includes the bead. The new frets have a 22 thou tang width, but the combination of the tang and the bead is 35 thou. This little saw that I made up, you saw me use this in some other videos when I was removing a bridge plate on an acoustic guitar. So it lets me drop into the slot and clean it out. You got to remember the fingerboard is bound on both sides with that plastic binding, so you need to be able to nudge up to the binding. Now, I just made this up today, and this is, yeah, that's 28 thou. This is how the math works out as far as getting the perfect amount of compression to hold the fret in place. This is for an ebony fingerboard. No glue, no super glue, but it can't be too tight because you got to remember you're driving 22 frets in. It's like 22 wedges forcing the neck into a gradual back bow if it's too tight. So this is the formula I use to get the perfect fit in an ebony fingerboard. The tang itself in the new frets is 22 thou wide. Now that does not include the bead, that's just the tang. The combination of the tang and bead is 35 thou. I open that slot with my new saw to 28 thou. That leaves a total of 7 thousandths of an inch of compression to hold that fret into the ebony fingerboard. You take that 7 thou, divide it by 2, and it's 0.0035 thou of compression on each side of the slot. I know that's kind of long-winded, but that's how I get the fit that I get. So I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the frets in and explain a little bit further about how I prepare the fingerboard to receive these frets. Now the Japanese saw allows me to drop in tight to the binding and then drag away from the binding towards center. And I come around this other side and same thing. The Japanese saw cuts on the pull stroke. Okay, so that's the first step. Cleaning out the slot and making sure we get tight to the binding. So next step, I have my 22 thou blade and I drag that across. All these slots have been prepared. I'm just taking the time to explain what I have done to prepare for these new frets. This is the new blade that I made up, also Japanese saw, and it is 28 thou. Another one of my father-in-law's files, and you know, for anyone that uses files, you quickly find out that all files are not equal. So I'm just kind of opening up the top of that curve, and you'll see there's no chipping on that ebony. Ebony is a lot more prone to chipping. When I bring you in tight and we look the full length of this fingerboard, there is not a single wood chip. Of course, the fret is cut longer than we need because we need that overhang to go to the extremity of the binding. So I make a little mark on the top of the crown to indicate where we're going to cut that tang off so that we get it tight to the binding. So both sides are marked. Now I clip the tang off, other side. Now with another one of my father-in-law's files, I'll refer to him anonymously as the millwright. This is one of the many millwright files that I got that I got willed to me from my father-in-law. Taya, thank you for that, Taya. This extended portion of the crown will overlap the plastic binding. What I'm doing next is I'm just kind of grabbing it with the end nippers and flexing it down so that when we drive the fret home, it'll be tight against that binding. Other side, same thing. And again, the operative phrase here is flex. You don't want to kink it or bend it. Just gently flex it down and then clip it off. So it's a little bit longer than I'd like to see. I'm going to bring it back a little bit further. Okay, I can live with that. There's a tiny little bit of overhang, but it's a small enough amount of overhang that when we go to edge dress, we're not going to jar the fret loose. I am going to carry on and put the rest of those frets in, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the nut here as well. This is my finished rough length. I'm just showing you that before I do the edge dress. This is the other side, again, kind of rough fit. I have no clamps or vices in the way as I do this job. Now I'm starting at the top end and overlapping my strokes as I go. millwright tool. Ooh, I like this better than the auger file. Okay, this is kind of final buff on these edges. The trick here is you got to keep the tool moving, because if you stop, you'll melt that binding. So keep that in mind. Just going over this with some ivory compound to just clean up any smudging from the other compound. This is just kind of a hand rub thing. Well, Gibson were not very generous on the amount of lead wire they left for this pickup, and that's why I had to take it out completely. I did end up correcting that fingerboard here, that proverbial hump at the neck junction, and you can see how thin that fingerboard, I didn't touch this part, this is right from the factory, and when it gets that thin I'll actually tape a couple of tongue depressors onto the top to be able to finish up these edges, get rid of any sharpness. So before I pulled that pickup all the way out, I soldered that wire to the leads, and this allows us to just pull it straight through right to the cavity where it came out. Got that neck pickup wired back into place. We're going to have strings on this thing pretty soon. Just finishing up a couple more Les Pauls. This Les Paul Custom, you can see on this nut that they were all negative values all the way across. It's another Les Paul neck surgery, just finishing up and getting the fit on that compensated nut blank. So that's the first move. I've thicknessed that leg so we get a good press fit, and I've radiused that 12-inch radius on the radius disc sander conversion kit for the drill press, and now we're going to cut that 12-inch radius on top. So here's a tip for the new Patreon guys that ordered their nut blanks and want to get into this whole compensated nut thing. So you saw that I did that 12-inch radius for the overhang, but to fast track this, I marked just ahead of the original nut on both sides and strike an arc, and that is also a 12-inch radius. Take my word for it, this will just speed things up. You want to do that. So we'll go over to the disc sander and sand that down. Okay, here's another tip for all you guys that got your compensator nut blanks. Do not cut that angle on the back part of the nut yet. Like that Les Paul Custom we just did, if you end up with negative values, then your compensation is going to come beyond the end of the fingerboard into the body of the nut itself. So don't slant that back edge yet. Well, Tom uses a 10 to 52 string, and I usually have those in stock myself, but I do not at the moment. Unfortunately, our local store, just a money-saving move, I guess, they're now closed on Wednesdays, so I'm just going to go ahead and center that truss rod cover. Screw that into place. We'll have to get back to this one tomorrow. We'll tuck that one away till tomorrow when we get our 10 to 52 strings, and we'll carry on from there. Back to the Les Paul Custom. Well, as to be expected for a guitar that's been around for 50 plus years and been played, there's a little bit of belt buckle rash on the back, and there's a few little nicks in a few places. I just rubbed down the back of that neck and the back, and we're going to flip it over and clean up the top. Well, I'd say overall it looks pretty good for a 50 plus year old guitar. Of course, all the gold hardware is tarnished, but it's still intact. The customer did spring for a new gold-plated set of machine heads. There's one last look. Before we do the tuning test, it's negative values all the way across all 6 strings. It'll be interesting to compare this to the Les Paul Standard with those 10 to 52 strings. Now, although it's not an acoustic guitar, it is pretty lively, so I've got my mute in there because the other strings are kind of ringing in sympathetic resonance. So we're isolating that one string. D. So we're hopping over to the second string. And the high E. Well, since the software is glitching out on the Peterson tuner as well as the Clear Tune tuner, I've gone to the Snark tuner. This is what I'm blowing over. F sharp minor 9, D major 7, A major 7, E add 9.